Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where fruit was medicine, luxury and emotional support all wrapped in one sweet-smelling peel. We're standing in a candlelit orangery, an entire building built just to house fruit trees. The air is thick with the perfume of citrus and damp, mossy stone. And somewhere between the potted trees and the marble statues, a nobleman in velvet slippers is whispering to an orange like it's a holy relic. This is Georgian England. The wigs are powdered, the corsets are tight, and the weather is, well, a reliable invitation to seasonal despair. Back then, they didn't have therapy apps or serotonin supplements, but they did have oranges. And they took them very seriously. So seriously, in fact, that some believed the very smell of one could lift the soul. Others insisted that eating one daily kept the spleen at bay, a catch-all, word for everything from boredom to full-blown depression. You probably won't survive this without smirking at least once. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me where you're listening from, man, what time it is in your corner of the world. Oh, now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start the evening in a sprawling country estate just outside Oxfordshire, where your boots crunch along gravel until you reach the doors of something oddly warm for this gray, drizzly season. The orangery glows, built from paneled glass and framed in whitewashed stone. It's both an architectural marvel and a bizarre devotion to vitamin C inside. Every tree has a name: Arabella, Daphne. Even the rather squat one by the wall is proudly called Lord Henry. The gardener bows to you as if to apologize for the tree's shortness. You're not surprised? These people name everything: horses, umbrellas, even soup bowls. A servant hands you a small silver plate with a peeled orange, perfectly segmented and glistening like treasure. He whispers, "For the mood, sir," and retreats before you can ask questions. The orange is cold from the room, but the flavor bursts like fire on your tongue. Tart, sweet, somehow, tastic. The Earl of Bridgewater arrives, wearing a housecoat embroidered with tiny orange blossoms. "We don't let the sadness settle in winter," he says, plucking a ripe one from a branch. "We eat these instead." Mainstream history agrees. Oranges were a mark of wealth, especially in the 1700s. Importing them required ships, connections, and enormous amounts of money. They were so rare at first that the upper crust would pose for portraits with them. Children of the aristocracy might get just one at Christmas. But here in this estate, they grow their own. Self-made sunshine, they call it. Fringe fact of the evening. Some nobles believed that keeping an orange in one's pocket could ward off melancholy. It's not just in scent, though the zest did play a part, but in presence. A reminder, they said, that life still had flavor. That nature could surprise you. That sadness was not a permanent state. You hold one now, still whole. Its dimpled skin cool against your fingers. The scent is immediate, bright, sharp, and oddly hopeful. It's not a cure, no. But maybe, just maybe, a small rebellion against the grayness of everything. Historians still argue whether this citrus craze was grounded in early psychology or simply the result of wealth and boredom. After all, when your biggest concern is whether the royal footman arranged your orange pyramid correctly, perhaps your sadness isn't clinical, it's seasonal or even fashionable. But this docentee explained why noble after noble kept detailed diaries about their emotional states after eating oranges, or why poets from the era praised them not just for taste, but for restoring cheer to the countenance. What's more, it's not just England. In parts of Italy, the orange tree was associated with virtue and vitality, often planted near sickbeds or court gardens. It traveled with Catholic monks as a healing emblem. You sip something warm, no orange blossom tea with cloves. It was a favorite of Lady Amelia Price, who claimed it cleared her mind of haunting fogs. You suspect it's mostly hot water and perfume, but you feel calmer. Or maybe it's the suggestion. Later, walking the gravel paths again, you see a group of powdered guests stepping into the orangery. One older gentleman is weeping openly. No one mocks him. Instead, a young girl, his granddaughter, places a soft orange in his hand and closes his fingers over it. He nods. He sits, and the room lets him be. It's a strange thing to witness. In today's terms, it might feel like cosplay. But here, in the soft lamplight and citrus-laced air, It doesn't feel ridiculous. It feels ... intentional. As you settle onto a chaise long beneath a waxy-leaved tree, your body finally warms. The orange in your hand pulses gently with the room's heat, and you begin to understand just a little why the Georgian aristocracy saw in it not just fruit but promise. You wake the next morning, figuratively, of course, to the soft hush of rain tapping the tall glass panes of the orangery. The sun hasn't quite broken through the gray quilt of English sky, but the air inside is warm and tinged with that ever-present citrus hum. You stretch, yawn, and wander barefoot over the cold tiled floor, still cradling the half-peeled orange you fell asleep holding. Somewhere in the distance, bells chime. Breakfast is being served in the east wing. You reushered by a valet who says little except to caution you gently. "Don't squeeze it too tight, sir. You'll spoil the mood." Breakfast is modest, in the way only the very wealthy can afford to pretend. Porridge, laced with rose water, eggs so yellow they look staged. But front and center, in a silver bowl like holy offerings, are oranges, plump, dimpled, and stacked into a small pyramid of joy. You take one. Everyone does. It would be impolite not to. A gentleman to your left sniffs his orange dramatically before slicing it open with a tiny silver blade.
Ice.
"This one smells hopeful," he declares.
Yes.
You think he's joking, until the others nod seriously. One woman closes her eyes entirely, holding her orange up like incense. The idea that fruit can store sunlight isn't so strange when you've gone a few weeks without it. Georgian winters were long, and even the rich suffered from the sluggish, aching melancholy of endless gray skies. The term seasonal affective disorder wouldn't exist for another few centuries, but they already felt the weight of it tin their bones in their journals. In the way their servants described them as thin in the spirit by late January, oranges were framed as miniature suns. Capsule of June, one reverend called them in his sermon against despair. If bread sustained the body, oranges lifted the soul. And they weren't just eaten, they were placed in bowls by windows, displayed in paintings, infused in oils and candles. If it could hold scent, it could hold happiness. This morning, you learn of a curious habit. Certain noble households had a designated orange day once a week, typically Sunday, when the entire household was permitted to have a slice or sniff of an orange, whether they were a countess or the stable boy. It was called Chase Away Day in some homes. In others, Zest Sabbath, mainstream fact of the morning. Orangeries weren't just pretty buildings, they were status symbols. Built to protect citrus trees from the bitter English winters, they required massive amounts of coal to heat and glass to maintain. Some orangeries cost more to operate annually than entire village farms. And yet, every well-to-do estate had to have one. Without it, you weren't just cold, you were socially irrelevant. As you stroll back to the orangery after breakfast, a footman tells you about the Earl's father, who once gifted a single orange to a rival lord during a truce. The man reportedly wept. "It's not fruit," he'd whispered. "It's mercy." The story is probably embellished, but you like it. You hold your orange a little closer. Now for the fringe. There's talk among the servants of an old superstition. It's said that if you eat an orange in silence without sharing a word or a thought, the fruit will whisper back to you before dawn. Something warm and good, they say, like laughter you forgot. Silly, yes, but the belief persisted, particularly in rural villages where citrus was rare and myth ran thick as cream. You hear a butler once refused to work in an orangery after dark. Too many whispering trees, he claimed. You smile. It's probably just the wind in the glass. Historians still argue whether this reverence for citrus was grounded in emerging ideas about nutrition and mood, or whether it was simply another indulgence, the rich wrapped in mysticism to feel better about being bored. After all, oranges aren't exactly medicinal. Or are they? One historian wrote, "We mustn't mistake absurdity for ignorance." Perhaps they knew something we've simply forgotten to listen for. You like that? It's the idea that not every strange habit is foolish, just untranslated. Later in the day, a tutor invites you to a small drawing room where the Earl's nieces are having their orange lessons. You brace for something ridiculous, yet it's strangely calming. They learn how to peel an orange in a single curl, how to identify varieties by scent alone, how to dry peels for sachets. To make a home smile, says the governess. Even when no one is laughing, one girl drops her orange. Another picks it up and gently places it back in her hand. No words. Just the soft gift of second chances. You wander past the orangery's side door, where crates of spoiled oranges are sorted and composted. A gardener plucks one from the pile, sniffs it sadly, and says, "This one gave up too soon." Yeah. You almost reply, but then you don't. Instead, you walk the long gravel path back to your guest room, where a single orange sits on your pillow. No note, no message. Just that bright, impossible color in a room of grays. You're summoned by the Earl himself that afternoon, just as the wind picks up and the glass panes of the orangery begin to tremble with the force of another. A footman finds you wandering near the East Garden and informs you that his lordship requests your presence in the lower grove. Which is odd, because technically this estate doesn't have a grove. But when you arrive after slipping through 2 hedges, a rose arch, and one very defensive swan, you see it. It's not a grove in the natural sense. There's no wild tangle of trees or earthy undergrowth here. It's a private enclosure lined with pale columns, marble busts, and a central gravel path flanked by terracotta pots, each holding a carefully trained orange tree. These are not tall trees. They're short, tidy, and manicured to within an inch of their lives. But they're bursting with fruit. The Earl is already waiting, wearing gloves despite the mildness of the day. He holds a long silver pruner in one hand, and in the other, a lace handkerchief dotted with orange oil. "This is the part of the estate I keep for myself," he says softly, eyes still scanning the trees. No guests, no horses. Just these. You expect him to laugh at the silliness of it. Doesn't. "This one is Diana," he says, touching the branch of a particularly widespread tree. "She prefers eastern sun. And that scraggly thing over there, that's Theobald. Never quite took to the soil here, poor fellow. But he tries." You nod solemnly, realizing this is a ceremony, not a conversation. He gestures for you to walk with him, and you follow, crunching along the gravel path as he explains how each tree came to be here. Some were gifts, diplomatic tokens from Italy or Spain. Others were grown from seed, carried in velvet-lined boxes across oceans. One was smuggled in through France, disguised as a box of wigs. The Earl laughs at that memory. Outrageous, but worth it. Here among the trees, time feels syrupy. The air is thicker with orange perfume, tinged with soil and wax, and the faint sweetness of aging fruit. You pass one tree that's draped in sheer muslin fabric, apparently to shield it from emotional shocks, the Earl explains. "This one's sensitive," he whispers. "Had a rough winter." Now, here's your historical anchor. Aristocrats in the Georgian period didn't just admire plants. They anthropomorphized them. They wrote letters to them. They kept journals chronicling their moods and growth patterns, often describing them with the same language used for children or lovers. It was part science, part performance, part something else entirely. Perhaps a reflection of the loneliness at the heart of many great houses. And it wasn't just oranges. Roses, tulips, even moss patches were given names, voices, and emotions. But oranges, with their foreign glamour and supposed power to uplift, held a particular reverence. They were both delicate and defiant, growing color in climates that barely permitted joy. The fringe fact for today: one documented noblewoman from Yorkshire, Lady Constance Harville, claimed she could discern the health of a household from the curve of an orange's pith. She would attend parties with a peeled segment tucked discreetly in her glove and sniff it whenever the conversation turned dull. Her journals are filled with entries like, "Lord B.'s parlor quite sour today. Guests reeking of basil despair. No sweetness found." It sounds absurd, but her records eerily match the letters from guests who reported feelings of gloom after those same events. Coincidence? The Earl pauses beside a sunken stone bench and offers you a slice from a freshly picked orange. It's warm from the tree, and when you bite into it, the flavor is sharper than before, zesty, almost electric. "Afternoon fruit," he says. "Always a bit cockier than the morning crop." You chuckle, and he finally smiles. As you rest on the bench, he tells you of his mother, a severe woman who ran the estate with near military precision. But every Thursday, she would retreat here, alone, to sit with the trees. She never spoke to them aloud, he says. But she'd sit for hours touching the bark. Came back lighter. Always. After her death, he started naming the trees. Some of them are hers, he adds, tapping the trunk of one slim orange tree with a lopsided canopy. This one leaned toward her. Still does. Even when we move the pot. Historians still argue whether this kind of tree worship was sincere spiritual practice, an aristocratic affectation, or a kind of genteel madness. But here in the hush of the grove, surrounded by fruit and fading sun, it doesn't feel like madness. It feels like memory. The Earl offers you a second slice, and you notice how carefully he avoids bruising the remaining segments. Every time you open one, it's like reading a letter, he says. You don't rush it. You walk further down the path, and he shows you the composting walla hidden trench, where fallen fruit is buried with layers of lavender and clove. Helps keep the sadness from rising, he says. We call it the melancholy ditch. It's not joking. You peek over the edge and see layers of softening fruit, their once bright skins turning amber and brown. The scent is unexpectedly lovely decay, yes, but fragrant, respectful. It smells like old perfume, or the back room of a very well-read bookshop. Even sorrow can be beautiful, the Earl mutters, almost to himself. By the time you reach the last tree, the sky has turned pale lavender. The rain has stopped. Somewhere behind you, the orangery lamps flicker to life again, casting golden squares across the lawn. The Earl presses a final orange into your palm. Take it with you for later. You nod, unsure whether he means for eating or for something else entirely. As you leave the grove, a breeze stirs the muslin over the sensitive tree. It flutters like a veil, like the dress of someone who's just turned a corner. You stop, glance back. Nothing, just leaves whispering their sleepy gossip. You pass the hedges and the swan again, and when you reach the gravel courtyard, you feel different. Not quite cheerful, not quite solemn, just still. As though some citrus-scented part of you has remembered how to sit with yourself. You slip the orange into your coat pocket. It's warm against your ribs. Imagine the Earl's voice in your ear. Some fruit isn't for hunger. It's for keeping things from leaking out. And for the rest of the evening, the weight of the day doesn't feel so heavy after all. The next morning begins with a heavy drizzle. The kind of English rain that doesn't falls so much as hover a gray mist, settling onto every surface like a long sigh. You pull your coat tighter and glance toward the orangery. Its glass walls blurred by condensation and glowing faintly from within like a house full of secrets. Today, you re-invited to take part in something rather exclusive. The estate's emotional weather review. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Once a week, the Earl hosts a private gathering where guests discuss their moods in relation to the actual weather, and unsurprisingly, the flavor of their morning oranges. You trudge toward the salon, where a half-circle of chairs is arranged around a roaring fire. The windows are streaked with rain, the kind of moody drizzle that poets insist is good for the soul. Beside each chair rests a delicate dish porcelain, bone-white, painted with tiny orange blossoms in. On each dish, a peeled orange segment glistening like a jewel. You sit, the fire crackles. A thin woman in violet gloves clears her throat. Fog today, she says. My slice is bitter. Direct correlation. A man with startlingly white sideburns nods sagely. Mine tasted watery, just like last night's dreams. You try your slice. It's surprisingly sweet, soft, almost overripe. You hesitate before speaking. It reminds me of childhood, you say, unsure why, warm and a little too much. The room murmurs approval. This is Georgian high society's idea of therapy, an hour of moody fruit interpretation in front of an open flame. It sounds ridiculous, but it's oddly grounding. Everyone listens. No one interrupts. There's something ritualistic about it. Even the fire seems to participate, throwing shadows that sway like thoughtful eyebrows. Here's your historical fact. In the 18th century, melancholia was widely believed to be a physical condition, tied to an imbalance of bodily humors, particularly black bile. Cold, wet climates were thought to provoke it, especially in those of a sensitive constitution. And so many doctors prescribed diet changes, scents, and specific colors to combat emotional gloom. Oranges, bright, warm, fragrant, became unofficial antidepressants. Physicians like Dr. Georgian, a real Georgian health guru, wrote about sadness of the nerves and suggested gentle remedies like lemon, balm tea, dry lodgings, and citrus oils. his more dramatic patients? Oranges 3 times daily in early bedtimes? This salon gathering you're sitting in now isn't just play acting. It's a descendant of those real therapeutic rituals. In fact, some Georgian households kept weather diaries where mood and citrus flavor were tracked side by side. Cloudy, cold, orange, lacked sparkle, felt unlovable. One 1791 entry reads, "It's almost poetic, almost Instagram." Fringe detail. One minor nobleman, Lord Fenwick of Cornwall, swore by his orange in the pantry trick. Whenever he felt despair creeping in, he would sneak into the cold pantry at midnight, peel an orange in the dark, and eat it with his eyes closed. He believed the contrast between the bitter chill and the burst of citrus taste shocked his soul back into balance. His estate journals include the line, "Woke weeping, but a chilled Valencia roused me. Can love be pulpy?" Today's salon ends with a strange ritual. Each guest wraps her orange peel in a linen square and tucks it into a small wooden drawer beneath their seat. It's called depositing the mood. Supposedly, this keeps bad energy from lingering in the house. The butler later empties these drawers and buries the peels in the garden. Historians still argue whether these practices were sincere attempts at mental health or a fashionable version of group drama. But think about a modern group therapy sessions so different. Sit in a circle, share feelings, track sensations, build metaphors. The only real difference is the fruit. You're led next to the drawing room, where Lady Beatrice, one of the Earl's cousins, offers you a strange beverage. Orange cordial mixed with cinnamon and honey. For emotional fortitude, she says, handing it over in a goblet shaped like a tulip. The taste is cloying but comforting, like drinking syrupy nostalgia. It coats your throat and seems to linger in the back of your mouth like a warm, humming note. She's eager to share her theory. "You know, I believe oranges teach us to expect layers," she says. "First the peel, then the pith, then the segment, then the juice. Like grief, like hope." You nod, mostly because it feels too rude not to. She pulls out a small notebook and shows you a series of diagrams. She's been recording the emotional gradient of her oranges for over a year. Peel color, scent resistance to pressure, taste, notes, and mood after consumption. "It's my private metric of resilience," she says, entirely serious. You wonder how many other aristocrats are quietly doing the same, tracking not stocks or inheritances, but pulp density and aftertaste. Maybe emotional survival in this cold, rainy world really did come down to the shape of a fruit. You take your leave gently and wander back into the orangery, which is once again humming with quiet life. The lamps have been lit early today, something about the thick clouds, and the whole place glows like a lantern held up to fog. You step between the trees, gently brushing your fingers over leaves and stems. You pause beside one squat tree whose fruit seems untouched. You take one. Just one. Peel it slowly. Inside, the segments are paler than usual. You bite and the taste surprises you. Not sweet, not bitter, just quiet. The flavor equivalent of still water. Not remarkable, but somehow peaceful. You sit on the edge of a planter box, the scent of orange rising from your palms. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a clock chime. 4 o'clock. Time for letters and lace and more tea. But for now, you're still. Just you, the rain, and this silent little fruit that's been saving aristocrats from sadness for centuries. You can't help but think of that phrase again, sunshine and appeal. And maybe that's all this was. Not a cure, not a miracle. Just a choice. A ritual. A symbol that someone, somewhere, had taken the time to grow something hopeful. And sometimes that's enough. By now, you've settled into a rhythm at the estate. Morning walks in the orangery, citrus salons in the afternoon, and in the evenings, long, winding stories told by candlelight always, over orange-infused cakes and something floral in a teacup. But today brings something different. You're invited to sit in on a consultation with the estate's personal physician, Dr. Ambrose Tillingham, who is known for 2 things: his impressive cravat collection and his deeply held belief that oranges, when applied correctly, could realign the human soul. He receives you in a study so crowded with books and bottled tinctures that you're not entirely sure where the floor ends and the desk begins. Scrolls are rolled into the crevices of windowsills, and at least 3 dried orange peels hang from ribbons nailed into the walls like preserved butterflies. Dr. Tillingham looks up with eyes magnified by thick spectacles. Ah, the visitor. Good. You have a melancholic gait. Excellent. He gestures for you to sit and immediately begins dabbing orange oil onto your pulse points. We begin with the wrists, for circulation of joy, then the temples, to discourage intrusive thoughts. Lastly, a small dot behind each earlobe, to keep the mind listening inward. Sit quietly, partly amused, partly unsure if you're being experimented on. He leans back in his chair with a loud sigh and begins. See? The orange is not simply a fruit. It is a stimulant of the better self. Not aggressive like coffee. Not sleepy like wine. Just calibrated. He clasps his hands, moves the body toward emotional centrism. Here's the mainstream fact tucked in this performance. Georgian physicians frequently blended science and symbolism in their prescriptions. While the humoral theory balancing bodily fluids was still dominant, a new wave of Enlightenment era doctors began studying the effects of scent and taste on temperament. Oranges, with their bright acidity and unmistakable aroma, became something of a darling to both camps. They were used not only in digestion, but also to treat nervous ailments, thought to arise from overstimulated lives. Women of the upper class were particularly prone, or so the medical journals claimed. 2 episodes of the vapors, a polite way to refer to emotional outbursts, fainting spells, or fits of unexplained despair. For these oranges were prescribed whole as juice, and even as dried slices tied around the waist. Dr. Tillingham opens a drawer and removes a strange-looking velvet pouch. This, he says with great reverence, is a portable orange remedy. Inside is a shriveled fruit wrapped in waxed linen, dated in ink, December 14th, 1792. You blink. Yes, it's still effective, he assures you. Not for eating, no, but the scent, preserved like an emotion sealed in time. And that brings us to today's fringe detail. Some aristocrats believed in the emotional memory of fruits, that an orange grown during a joyful summer could retain a trace of that joy even years later. These vintage fruits were often kept like mementos, wrapped carefully hidden in writing desks, or displayed under glass domes. One duchess reportedly carried a dried orange slice in her prayer book for over 30 years, and swore it brought her calm during church sermons she found frightfully judgmental. Back in the study, Dr. Tillingham asks you to close your eyes and sniff an orange clove pomandra, popular Georgian remedy for seasonal dread. He asks what you feel. You say, school holidays. He nods. That's good. Nostalgia is medicinal in moderation. He leads you next to his wall of sadness, where various orange-based tinctures are stored in bottles labeled with poetic names: waning cheer, solace bloom, amber drift, bitter reprieve. Don't let the names fool you, he says. These are not perfumes. They are formulations of equilibrium. The goal is not joy, is centeredness. Too much joy can be destabilizing. Historians still debate whether figures like Tillingham were eccentric quacks or pioneers in emotional wellness. One camp insists they were simply indulging the era's obsession with novelty. The other argues they were laying the foundation for what we now recognize as aromatherapy and psychosomatic medicine. You decide not to choose. You reach just here for the ride, and the smell of orange peel. Simmering in that tiny copper kettle by the window, you spend the afternoon reading through his casebooks. Most entries begin with the patient's weather complaints, followed by their citrus dose. Lady Rowan, disappointed with spring, administered sweet Seville orange, half tea infusement. Repeat nightly. Result: dreams, vivid, temper steadied. Others are more cryptic. Lord E refused orange, called it fruit for poets, prescribed bergamot blend, no improvement. A knock on the study door signals the arrival of his next patient, a young man in a green waistcoat and obvious distress. You step outside to give them privacy, but not before hearing the doctor say gently, "Let's see what the peel has to say today." You find yourself back in the orangery just before sunset. The lamps are low. The air is thick with that familiar sweet citrus perfume. You sit on a bench beside a pot marked Marguerite and feel a kind of calm settle over you. Not happiness. Exactly. Stillness.
Thanks.
As if the world has gone a bit softer around the edges. You pull from your pocket the small orange Dr. Tillingham handed you earlier. It's still unpeeled. You hold it close to your nose and breathe. The scent is sharper now, mingled with the coolness of the room. It smells like clean sheets, like memory, like a sigh you didn't know you were holding in. You stay there for a long time, doing nothing, breathing in orange air and listening to the glass creak under the evening wind. You wonder how many people over the centuries sat right here clutching fruit as though it could anchor them. Maybe it did. And before you stand, you whisper something silly to the tree beside you. Thanks, because somehow that little orange did make you feel better. You wake the next morning to a curious sight. A footman waiting beside your bed with a velvet-lined tray bearing a single orange no-note. No explanation, just fruit, perched like a sun on a throne. He bows slightly and says, "For the day ahead, some find it preventative." Preventative of what exactly isn't stated, but you suspect the answer would be everything. You wash, dress, and carry the orange with you like a talisman. Today, the estate is buzzing with quiet excitement. A small group of guests is preparing for a ride into town, while others are setting up chairs in the orangery. You overhear a footman whisper that a performance is expected. A performance? Yes, but not one of music or poetry. No, today's event is far more unusual. An orange peel reading. It's held in the south wing, oranger, less formal, more relaxed, with wide benches and fragrant herbs hanging in bunches from the rafters. At the center stands Lady Prudence, a noble woman known equally for her eccentricity and her emotional intuitions. She greets you with a sly smile and gestures toward a bowl of oranges. "Choose with care," she says. "Your soul may be tucked beneath the rind." You pick one. She watches. Then, with a tiny golden blade, she begins to peel it slowly, carefully, in one long curl. She lays the peel on a velvet cloth and studies it like a cartographer reviewing a treacherous coast. She hums. "You've been holding in too many apologies." You laugh, involuntarily. She continues. "This segment here, worn edges, that's hesitation. But this deep vein along the inner pitho, that's courage, hiding. You'll use it soon." Is it ridiculous? Absolutely. But everyone in the room is listening, leaning in, holding their own fruit like oracles waiting to be revealed. And you're strangely captivated. Here's your mainstream anchor. In Georgian England, symbolic readings weren't reserved just for palms and tea leaves. Fruit divination, particularly with oranges, was considered both playful and, in some circles, spiritually insightful. Peels were read for signs. Pith patterns were said to resemble rivers of thought. Segments were counted and matched to emotions. It was an acceptable parlor game that tiptoed into private belief. One fringe account from a Cambridge journal in 1786 describes a noblewoman who refused marriage after her orange peel broke into 4 pieces, a sign of scattered fortune. She wed someone else a year later, and according to the same diary, was haunted by sourness. Whether that referred to regret or marmalade, we may never know. Lady Prudence smiles as she finishes your reading and wraps the peel in silk.
"Take it with you," she says.
Let the scent soften you. You tuck the bundle into your coat pocket like it's treasure. Outside, the rain has let up, and a pale winter sun struggles through the clouds. You walk the path slowly, passing others in quiet contemplation, each holding an orange or carrying one peeled and parsed. It's like being among pilgrims, each convinced that citrus might bring clarity. You hear whispers of stories. One guest claims an orange scent cured her of grief after her sister's passing. Another insists he dreamed more sweetly with orange blossoms tucked under his pillow. They hum lullabies, he says, deadpan. No one laughs. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were spiritual in nature or just another expression of privilege. A way for the upper class to turn boredom into ritual. But the sheer consistency of the practice, the documentation, the journals, the oil recipes, the peel charm suggests that, sincere or not, it meant something real to them. You're invited to tea, held in a small sunlit parlor, where slices of orange cake sit beside rosewater biscuits and pots of steaming orange blossom tea. The Earl is there, lounging with his coat unbuttoned, reading from a leather-bound book of citrus lore. "Listen to this," he says, holding the book aloft. It is said that to inhale deeply of the zest of a Seville orange at the moment of decision is to awaken the mind's nobler impulses. He chuckles. They really believe this stuff. But then he closes the book and adds, and yet I always take one with me to Parliament. Never had a shouting match while sniffing citrus. Coincidence unclear. The tea is delicate, the cake dense and golden, and the conversation drifts from silly orange stories to childhood memories. You realize with a slow kind of wonder that everyone here, no matter how titled or adorned, has some citrus tale tucked away. A moment, a memory, a belief. Later that evening, you find a small corner in the orangery, where a spiral staircase leads up to a narrow gallery. You climb quietly and emerge into a loft that smells like dust, oil, and drying orange peel. An old bench and a telescope face the western glass. You sit. Below, you watch the others move like slow dancers among the trees. The lamps cast soft shadows. A woman leans over to sniff a blossom. A man brushes dirt from a leaf like it's made of silk. Someone hums. You take the orange from your coat pocket. It's the one from this morning. Still whole. Still bright. You don't peel it. You just sit with it. Hold it in your palms. Breathe it in. It smells of something ancient and kind. Something you can't quite name. Ooh. Return to the orangery just after dawn. The glass panes are fogged from warm air, meeting morning chill, and light filters in like polite guests. The trees wait silently. You tighten your coat and drift through the citrus-scented stillness. Then Liddy, a young housemaid, appears at the side door. Would you like to see the hidden ones? You nod, unsure what that means. She leads you through a narrow corridor, past drying linens and baskets of herbs, down creaking stairs into a forgotten storeroom filled with wooden boxes. In the corner sits a faded orange cabinet. This is where we keep them, she says. The sadness peels. She unlocks the cabinet with a small brass key. Inside are dozens of muslin pouches, each labeled with a name and date. Some recent, some decades old. Every maid is a loud one, Liddy explains. When it gets too heavy, you peel an orange, cry if you must, then wrap the peel and leave it here. The sadness stays. You go on. You blink, and it works. Liddy smiles. We wouldn't keep doing it if it didn't. Here's your mainstream history moment. Life below stairs in Georgian estates was exhausting 14-hour days. It's constant scrutiny. No space for grief. There were no therapists, no time to pause, but rituals, secret songs, notes, charms, offered survival, even oranges, rare for the staff, became something more than fruit. While the gentry used citrus for health or fashion, the servants used it for release. One scullery maid S1795 diary mentions a peel journal, where girls drew their orange peels next to how they felt. Spiraled peels for calm, jagged ones for pain. The peel mirrored the moment. Back in the storeroom, Liddy hands you a pouch. Just smell it. Some people don't need to add their own. You do. It smells soft-aged citrus, maybe clove. It doesn't make you happy exactly, but it clears a space inside you, like cracking a window in a sealed room. Sometimes I don't even cry, Liddy says. I just sit here and hold one. Later, you help Edwin polish the leaves of the older trees in the orangery. They get dusty in winter, he says. It's sad if no one touches them. He gives you a cloth soaked in something citrusy and herbal. Out. Wipe gently. Talk to them if you like. You laugh, but as you work, you speak quiet thoughts about the weather, the tea, the strangeness of being here. You're not sure who you're talking to. Maybe the tree, maybe yourself. Edwin shares that he used to hate oranges. Too fancy, too sticky. But now, they're like old dogs. Smell good. Never ask too much. Always show up. He nods toward a crooked little tree. Buried my grief under that one. My brother died in spring. I peeled an orange. Couldn't eat it. Put the peels in the dirt. That year it flowered more than any other.
Oh.
Swear it. Historians still argue whether working-class orange rituals were inherited folk customs or borrowed from the nobility, but it's clear they weren't the same. Upstairs, citrus was poetry. Downstairs it was practice, a way to hold sorrow without it holding you. That evening, back in your room, you find a bundle on your pillow, simple linen, twine-tied. Inside, a half-peeled orange, still fragrant. A note. For tomorrow or the next blue day. You don't know who left it? Liddy, Edwin, the Earl, it doesn't matter. It warms you. After sunset, everyone gathers in the orangery for the lighting. Once a month, they ignite every lamp dozens until the glass house glows like a golden lantern. The trees shimmer. The air smells of citrus and warmth. Each person holds an orange. No one speaks. When the last lamp is lit, the Earl silently peels his fruit and begins to eat. Everyone follows. It's not a toast. It's not a feast. It's quiet resilience. A shared softness. A ritual that says, here, under this light, you can feel something without explanation. You peel yours slowly. The scent rises around you. And for a brief breath-held moment, you believe what they've always said. Oranges really do keep the sadness away. You wake to the unmistakable sound of commotion. A high, delicate scream echoes down the corridor, followed by the distinct crash of something shattering glass or porcelain, maybe both. You sit up, heart thudding, unsure whether to laugh, run, or hide. Before you can decide, a harried maid bursts into your room and gasps. She's fainted into the oranges. You don't ask who she is, you just follow. The orangery is chaos, but genteel. Theatrical chaos. At the center of the main walkway lies Lady Arabella. One arm flung dramatically over her brow, the other entangled in a toppled basket of fresh oranges. The fruit has scattered everywhere under benches, into flower beds, even into the lap of a horrified bishop. A footman fans her gently with a lace fan that does absolutely nothing. Aunt Beatrice stands to one side, clutching a velvet handkerchief and muttering, I told her not to skip her morning zest. No one dares move, Lady Arabella. She's breathing. In fact, she might be faking it. There's a very purposeful flutter in her lashes. And her lips are puckered in a way that suggests she's both unconscious and awaiting applause. Bring a Valencia, someone whispers urgently. A warm one. Here comes the estates. Citrus Valley-S. Apparently that's a thing with a silver dish bearing a single sun-kissed orange wrapped in linen. It's unwrapped, waved beneath Lady Arabella's nose, and just like that, she stirs. She gasps. Oh, the zest, it saved me. A collective sigh ripples through the gathered nobility. The orange has worked its miracle. Now here's your historical moment. Fainting fits, or nervous collapses, were common social phenomena in the Georgian era, particularly among women. Whether due to tight corsets, poor ventilation, emotional suppression, or simply social pressure, these swoons became expected performances at high society events, and the cures often symbolic. Scented salts, cool cloths, and yay citrus fruits. The logic was simple. Oranges were bright, fragrant, and foreign. They startled the senses. In a time when medical understanding of mental health was shaky at best, anything that brought the mind back to the body even momentarily was seen as powerful. Lady Arabella sits up slowly, still milking the moment. A servant discreetly wipes orange juice from her gown. I felt the gloom rise up from the tiles, she murmurs. But then, a peel, a bloom, and I returned. You can't help but smirk. And yet the deeper truth behind the melodrama is quietly compelling. The belief that sensory memory tastes, scent, texture can ground you, interrupt a spiral, and tether your soul back to your skin, that's not foolishness. That's neuroscience in a frock coat. Fringe fact of the day. In 1774, a failed opera singer turned physician named Dr. Cosmo Bellwether published a peculiar pamphlet titled On the Revival of Hysterics by Citrus Vapors. In it, he claimed that boiling orange peels in a silver pot and inhaling the steam could rouse the feminine spirit from torpor more effectively than salts or slaps. He also recommended orange oil mixed with rainwater as a topical joy tonic, to be applied to the temples before any gathering likely to induce stress, such as weddings, funerals, or chess matches. Historians still debate whether Bellwether's methods had any scientific merit. Some insist he was ahead of his time in understanding olfactory therapy. Others say he was just bored and fruity. Back in the orangery, the disaster is being cleaned up. Servants crawl among the trees, retrieving escaped oranges with surprising reverence. No one steps on one. No one wastes even a damaged rind. They are gathered into a separate basket marked rescue zest, which you assume will be made into oil, tea, or perhaps some melancholia pudding later. Lady Arabella, now recovered, insists on a chaise, and begins telling anyone who will listen about the moment her soul nearly left through her gloves. Quietly slip outside, the air brisk and scented with damp stone, and you can't help but chuckle, not because it's absurd, but because it's so thoroughly sincere. In this world, to faint into a pile of oranges and believe it saved you is not delusion. It's ritual, it's narrative, and that makes it real enough. Walk the outer paths of the estate and find a quiet bench overlooking a grove of leafless trees, birch, maybe, or aspen, silent, spectral. A gardener approaches, nods politely, and offers you a simple cup. Inside, warm orange broth, spiced with clove and a hint of ginger. Recovery tea, he says, for watching disasters from a safe distance. You sip, it's delicious. As you sit, you think about how much emotion gets wrapped around small things. A scent, a cup, a shape. And how sometimes, when we're unraveling inside, it takes something gentle and fragrant to sew us back together. You'll remember a line from one of the journals in the study. Sadness is the body forgetting how the world smells. Citrus reminds it. You finish your tea, you rise slowly. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you admit maybe a little orange every day does keep something awful away. It's maybe not sadness itself, but the stickiness of it. It's the part that won't let go, that you decide is more than enough. The day begins unusually quiet. There's no clatter of boots on polished wood, no distant murmuring from salons. Even the birds seem hesitant. The air feels thick, like the house has drawn in a long breath and forgotten to release it. You dress slowly, pull on your coat, and make your way toward the orangery, unsure what you'll find. When you arrive, you find the lamps already lit for morning. The room is warm, almost too warm, and filled with a thick, resinous perfume. A copper kettle simmers gently on a side table, orange peel and lavender swirling inside. The windows are misted, and across the tiles, several figures sit quietly in clusters, speaking in hushed tones. You've stumbled upon something solemn. The Earl notices you, nods slightly, and gestures for you to join him. We're observing the Day of the Black Dog, he says, a family tradition. You've heard the phrase before, the black doggin, old metaphor for depression, used long before psychology gave it clinical names. It stalked famous figures like Churchill, haunted writers and philosophers. But here, in this house of curated light and curated fruit, it has taken on ceremonial form. Today's observance, the Earl explains, is not about mourning, it's about acknowledgement. We do not pretend it isn't there, he says, but we offer the beast something gentle to chew on. He points to a small wooden bowl beside each guest, one filled with warm orange slices, soaked in honey and thyme. You sit with yours, unsure what's expected. Nothing, apparently, just presence. Here as your historical anchor, the term black dog as a metaphor for depression has roots going back centuries. In British folklore, black dogs were omens, creatures of shadow seen on moors and roadsides, signaling death or misfortune. By the Georgian era, the metaphor had evolved into a way of naming melancholy without inviting scandal. To say he's visited by the black dog was to acknowledge suffering without speaking it too plainly. In elite circles, emotional ailments were masked behind euphemisms. A woman might be described as in need of sea air when gripped by despair. A man might be said to have retired to his library for reflection when overcome by sadness. And yet, beneath all the language, the suffering was real and often profound. Oranges, for reasons both practical and poetic, became a favored tool in the fight against this invisible beast. Their color was a jolt to gray days. Their scent was thought to sharpen the senses. Their taste bright, sharp, live could, even briefly, pull one from the fog. Fringe detail? One earl in Devonshire insisted on keeping a carved wooden black dog on his desk beside a bowl of fresh oranges. Whenever he felt himself slipping, he would peel a fruit slowly, place the rind in the dog's open mouth, and wait until the scent filled the room, claimed it bought him a few hours of peace. In today's ritual, every member of the household, servants included, is given time in the orangery. No tasks are assigned. No conversations are forced. Some people sit and stare. Others peel silently, the sound of rind tearing echoing softly through the glass dome. You take your orange and begin to peel it, slowly, letting each strip fall into your lap. The scent rises, sweet and grounding. You eat without hunger? Lady Beatrice arrives late, dressed entirely in gray silk. She walks a slow circle around the orangery, pressing an orange to her chest, like a stone. You don't know her story, but you don't need to. Grief has its own language, and today it is citrus-shaped. Historians still argue whether the use of oranges in Georgian emotional care was medical, symbolic, or simply indulgent. But they cannot deny the sheer volume of written accounts journals. Letters, recipes describing oranges as a balm to the mood. Not just consumed, but preserved. Not just eaten, but shared. The repetition suggests something deeper than fashion. You learn of a peculiar household rule here. No one may consume the last orange of the day alone. Isolation, the Earl explains, feeds the black dog. So when the sun begins to lower and the bowls are nearly empty, guests begin pairing off. Some sit in pairs, others in quiet trios, but no one remains alone. You find yourself next to Edwin, the gardener from before. He hands you half an orange and says nothing. You each eat your halves slowly, breathing between bites. The fruit is cold and sharp, not sweet, but it keeps you tethered. There's a logbook in the orangery called the Dog's Journal. Anyone may write in it on this day reflections, dreams, or single words. You flip through the pages, floating one entry reads, "Cracked glass," says another. "Better now," says a third. You pick up the quill, pause, and write. Held. You don't analyze it. You just let it stay. As the sun dips below the treetops, the Earl rises and carries a basket of peels into the garden. A path lined with lanterns leads to a small stone trough filled with ash and earth. One by one, the guests place their peels into it. The Earl adds a pinch of dried blossom and lights a match. Smoke curls upward, scented with flame and fruit. No prayers are spoken, just silence. The idea, the Earl says, is not to banish the black dog, but to remind it there is no feast for it here. Only light. Only scent. Only shared fruit and quiet resolve. You return to the orangery one last time. The fire is low. The chairs are emptying. You sit by the warm stones and peel a second orange, not because you're sad, but because the act itself feels holy. The fruit gives willingly. The scent rises again. You close your eyes. And in that space, fragile, fragrant, human you understand what this ritual truly is. Not superstition, not indulgence. It's hope, wrapped in peel, whispered in steam. And for today, that's enough to keep the dog at bay. It's just past midnight when the whispering begins. Ghostly, not threatening. Just the soft shuffle of slippered feet, the creak of stairs, the occasional cough muffled behind a sleeve. You rise, bleary-eyed, and peek into the hall. A row of shadows glides toward the west wing, all headed in the same direction. You follow, heart thudding like a child sneaking into forbidden territory. The trail leads not to the orangery, but to a small corridor off the main library. There, behind a half-closed door, candlelight flickers. You'll push gently and enter a room filled with citrus and conspiracy. It's not quite a kitchen, not quite a study. Something in between. A chamber of warm stone, with copper pots stacked neatly. A long table covered in parchment and orange peels strewn like confetti. 5 people are gathered around the table. You recognize Lady Beatrice, a housemaid or two, and yes, the Earl himself, seated with sleeves rolled up, zest under his nails. "Ah," he says without turning. Another guest. "Welcome to the Midnight Peel Society." You blink. Beatrice smiles.
Ow.
"We gather once a month. A bit of zest, a bit of plotting, a bit of honest conversation. No titles allowed. Just peels and truth. You're handed a small paring knife, an orange, and a stool. No further instructions. You sit and begin peeling. Here's the premise. As you peel, you speak. Not about politics or whether a literature, but about yourself. Something real. The idea is that the act of peeling distracts the anxious part of your brain, the part that censors. The scent keeps things grounded. The fruit, when eaten, gives back whatever you offered up. Tonight, the topic is things unsaid. Lady Beatrice begins. "I never wanted to marry," she says, "but I did. Because I thought the sadness would be lighter with someone to blame."
Oh, no one.
Flinches. A footman follows. "Sometimes I leave the estate for a full hour. Just stand in the trees. Pretend I'm free. Another voice. I write poems about the oranges, but I sign them with the cook's name. You hesitate, then speak. I still carry a letter I never sent. The person doesn't live there anymore, but I pretend they might. Nods all around. The peeling continues. The scent thickens, a blend of confession and citrus oil. Here's your historical core. Midnight societies like this weren't entirely fictional. In Georgian homes, especially those with eccentric or intellectual owners at late-night gatherings, took place under various names. Lunar salons, midnight assemblies, nocturne circles. While most were focused on poetry or philosophy, some delved into more emotional territory. It was understood that night, coupled with candlelight and ritual, could open a person's interior world. One such group recorded in the marginal notes of Lady Winthrop's 1792 diary called themselves the Keepers of Peel. They met once a fortnight under the pretense of reviewing citrus imports. In truth, they wrote anonymous letters, aired unspoken grievances, and burned rinds as symbolic gestures of release. It was emotional hygiene wrapped in etiquette. Tonight's ritual ends with what the Earl calls the burial of slices. Each person places one segment of their orange on a dish, carries it out into the cold, buries it in a shallow trough beneath a lemon tree. It's absurd, Lady Beatrice whispers, but it makes space. Fringe detail? One rural manor in Yorkshire held an annual event called the Peel Vigil, during which villagers sat in silence around a fire, each holding an orange, peeling only when a certain owl call was heard, believed to signal a shift in the soul. Yes, an owl. Yes, an orange. They were absolutely serious. Back in the orangery which you return to after the burial, the air is still warm. One lamp burns. You sit near it, cupping your hands around your orange and breathing in what remains. You think about how peeling a fruit is such a small act, and yet here, it holds the weight of memory, vulnerability, and even healing.
Maybe that's why it works.
Not because it cures sadness, but because it acknowledges it, sits beside it. It smells good in the process. Historians still argue whether these midnight gatherings were healing or performative. Some claim they were just aristocrats looking for novelty. Others believe they were primitive versions of group therapy spaces, cloaked in ritual, before the concept even had a name. You think of it more simply. A bunch of tired people in a quiet house, trying not to drown in themselves, trying to taste something bright, to say something honest, to bury something small and heavy. You fall asleep that night with orange zest still on your fingers, and the words of strangers echoing gently in your mind. And for the first time in a while, your sleep is dreamless, not because nothing's stirring inside you, but because something was released. And maybe that's the real power of the midnight peel. Not magic, not madness, just shared silence. And fruit. You rise the next morning, still drowsy from the midnight gathering. The orangery is unusually empty, quiet, too quiet. No servants are bustling with trays, no guests wandering with citrus in hand. A note under your door reads, "Today's lesson is in town. If you're curious, follow the cart with the white ribbon. You don't hesitate." A white-ribboned cart waits by the stable, drawn by two dappled horses and loaded with baskets, dozens of them, each filled with oranges wrapped in cloth and tied with twine. A driver nods to you and gestures to the back. Hop in, mind the peels. The ride to town is bumpy and damp, but the scent of citrus is overwhelming, in the best way, sharp, rich, and oddly comforting. As you bounce along muddy roads and foggy hedgerows, the baskets jostle, and every now and then an orange escapes its confines and rolls across the cart floor like a tiny, sticky fugitive. You arrive at the edge of a poorer neighborhood in the villagia place of cracked cobbles and leaning chimneys, where people wear two coats in winter, not for fashion, but necessity. You expect a discreet handoff, perhaps a quiet donation. You are very wrong. Instead, you're met with a sudden burst of color. A dozen children rush the cart, laughing, reaching for oranges like they're gold coins. One yells, "The orange lady's back." Another shouts, "She brought the laughing ones." And there she is, Lady Beatrice, dressed not in silk, but in a wool coat, apron tied at her waist, hair pinned back. She's laughing too, tossing oranges to children who catch them like they're sacred. A young boy fumbles one and chases it under a cartwheel, unbothered by the mud. You hop down, confused, and Beatrice catches your expression. Did you think we only peeled for ourselves? She says. Oranges are joy. It must be shared. You begin helping unload. For every child who catches one, a smile breaks across a face. For every parent who thanks her with a bowed head, Beatrice smiles and says the same thing. For mood, for the day. Here's your historical grounding. In the late Georgian era, some aristocrats, particularly women, began developing charitable habits tied to excess. Rather than simply donating money, they created rituals around giving. Oranges, with their relative scarcity and bright symbolism, became common gifts at orphanages, hospitals, and almshouses. One recorded instance from 1793 details Lady Georgina Cavendish personally delivering oranges to every widow in her district during the bleakest weeks of winter. She called it Joy's Errand. Letters from recipients survived to this day, describing how the scent alone made them weep. Back in the village, Beatrice kneels to slice oranges for an older woman with no teeth. She dabs each piece in clove sugar and places it gently into the woman's palm. She hasn't smiled since Michaelmas, a neighbor whispers. But last time the orange did it. Fringe detail. In parts of rural Ireland, citrus fruit was believed to carry the sun's echo. Giving one to someone depressed was thought to lend them some of your own energy, transferred through the peel. Even the act of receiving the orange was treated as a blessing. Beatrice hands you an orange and points toward a boy sitting alone by a gate, arms wrapped around his knees. He's lost someone, she says. Don't speak. Just give. You walk to the boy slowly and offer the orange. Doesn't look up immediately, but he does take it, turns it over in his hands. You sit beside him in silence. Eventually he peels it roughly, unevenly, and eats. One piece, then two, then three. You say nothing. He never speaks. But when you stand to leave, he gives you the smallest nod, a gesture heavy with meaning. You ride back with an emptier cart and a heavier heart, not with sadness, but with something more grounded. The understanding that beneath the aristocratic eccentricities and nightly rituals lies something deeply human. The desire to lift another person from their heaviness, even if only for a moment. Historians still argue whether these charitable orange runs were genuine or performative. Some believe they were staged to polish reputations. Others insist they were sincere extensions of ritualized self-care. But the people in town didn't care. The fruit arrived, the scent spread, the smiles happened, tent became irrelevant. That night, the estate holds what they call the soft banqueted dinner, where only food deemed emotionally kind is served. No loud spices, no heavy meats, just steamed puddings, soft breads, poached pears, and of course candied orange peel in every course. Even the candles are orange-scented, their flame unusually golden. You sit beside the Earl, who drinks tea with orange blossom and thyme. You saw the real reason, didn't you? He says. Why we do all this? You nod. He raises his cup. Not all sadness is ours, and not all healing must be grand. After dinner, the guests gather in the orangery for quiet conversation. No performances, no confessions, just shared space, warm citrus light, and the distant chirping of night birds. Someone plays a harp. Someone else hums. The atmosphere is thick with orange oil, laughter, and the soft kind of silence that soothes instead of isolates. You step out for air. The stars are out finally. A rare, clear night. You look up, exhale, and from your coat pocket, pull an orange. It's a little bruised from the ride. You peel it anyway. The scent rises instantly. It's not just fruit. It's memory. It's touch. It's the whisper of someone trying to say, "Here, I thought of you." It's near midnight again, but tonight, you're not in the orangery or the library. Tonight, you're in a bath. More specifically, you're in a marble-walled chamber off the north wing. Filled with flickering candlelight, soft steam, and the intoxicating scent of orange blossom. A fire crackles in a small hearth. Pale basin of cut fruit rests near your elbow. The bathwater itself is laced with citrus and rose, the surface shimmering with thin oil slicks like liquid gold. You were invited here by the Duchess, a cousin of the Earl, who insists on her own nightly citrus immersion. When you arrived, she simply handed you a robe, pointed to the tub, and said, "Words aren't always necessary." So you sit, soak, breathe. This is not about cleanliness. This is ritual. The Duchess reclines in a tub beside yours, separated by a carved screen that gives the illusion of privacy without requiring actual distance. She hums to herself an old tune, maybe a hymn, maybe a lullaby, and now and then she murmurs things that feel too soft to be meant for you. Peel in the morning, blossom at dusk, sorrow floats better in warm water. You close your eyes and let yourself drift. Here's your historical grounding. Hydrotherapy had a curious rise in popularity during the Georgian era, especially among the upper classes. While cold plunges were fashionable, warm baths infused with herbs, milk, or citrus were equally common for delicate nerves. Orange blossom water, specifically, was touted as a tonic for hysteria, insomnia, and ungovernable temperaments. It was believed that the scent of citrus could bypass the mind's defenses, that it could sneak past pride, past pretense, and soothe whatever sorrow couldn't be named. Whether in tea, in candles, or as you now know, in steaming bath water. The Duchess offers you a small orange from her dish. Bite it. Before it cools, she says. You do. The fruit is warm, slightly cooked from the water's heat, and sweeter than any you've tasted before. Almost floral. You chew slowly, savoring it like a secret. She speaks again, softly. I was once very cruel, she says. Once, I never apologized. But I've bathed every night since. Sometimes I wonder if the water remembers. You say nothing, not because you don't care, but because silence feels more honest. She chuckles gently, as though reading your thoughts. I don't expect redemption from a fruit, but I like the idea that it tries. Here's a fringe detail. In some parts of southern France, orange blossoms were sewn into pillows as a sleep aid, not just for scent, but to soothe the sins of the day. Sleep, they believed, would come more gently if one laid their head on something fragrant and forgiving. The Duchess reaches for a comb and begins brushing her wet hair slowly. I once asked a monk if citrus counted as prayer, she says. He didn't answer, but he smelled like marmalade, so I took that as a yes. Historians still argue whether the elite's obsession with orange blossom rituals was anything more than vanity. But letters, ledgers, and travel diaries suggest these baths were more than beauty treatments. They were soft spaces and hard days places where grief, regret, and longing could be suspended in steam and citrus. After the bath, a maid brings in warm cloths, robes, and a tray of orange petal cakes. You and the Duchess sit by the hearth, sipping bitter orange tisane, wrapped in layers of cotton and linen. She reaches into a cedar box and removes a tiny glass vial. Inside is a clear oil orange, lavender, and something else, frankincense maybe. She dabs it behind each ear, then on her wrists. This keeps the sorrow from following me to bed, she explains. Doors don't always stop it. She offers you some. You take it. The scent is sharp, sacred, like memory after rain. She rises, ready to return to her rooms, but pauses in the doorway. The fruit won't save you, she says, but it will sit beside you while you try to save yourself. You find your way back to your guest room slowly. The house is hushed, shadowy. You pass a window and see your own reflection holding a candle tired, softened, scent-laced. Someone who has been gently unmade, then remade in steam. On your bedside table, a small note. Tonight, sleep as someone cared for. Beside it, a single orange blossom and a glass of water. You slip beneath the covers, the oil still clinging to your skin, the warmth of the bath still in your bones. Sleep comes easily, not as an escape, as an offering. Morning returns with a strange kind of hush, not heavy, not ominous, just still, as if the house itself is catching its breath. The sky is pale, washed out blue, the trees swaying gently with a breeze that smells faintly of moss and something sweeter. You find a tray at your door, as usual, but today, no teapot, no cake, just a small glass of orange cordial and a folded card that reads, "Today we climb." You follow a series of discreet chalk arrows that lead you through servant corridors. Up a staircase you've never noticed, past a linen closet that smells of lavender and lemons, and finally, onto a narrow landing facing an ancient wooden ladder. Above it, a hatch. You look up. The air feels different. Here lighter, cooler. You push the hatch open. The rooftop garden is real. It's not a myth, not a metaphor. An actual garden, stone planters, moss between the slates, wooden benches warped by time, and orange trees growing in great clay pots lashed securely to the roof beams. As the wind sings here, the sun hits the stone like gold. The Earl is already seated at a table set for two, sipping something from a tall glass. Excellent. You found it. Most guests never look past the third stairwell. You sit breathless not from the climb, but from the view. The estate stretches in every direction, fields, hedgerows, the faint line of the sea in the far distance. It's breathtaking. This is where the first orange came, he says. Great-great-grandfather smuggled it in a coat pocket from Sicily. He planted the seeds up here like contraband. Said it was the only place the fruit smiled. Here's your historical anchor. In many Georgian estates, rooftop gardens were used to grow delicate plants that needed sun and wind, but were vulnerable to deer, frost, or wandering hands. Oranges were sometimes kept in pots that could be brought down during winter. But a few daring estates tried year-round rooftop cultivation. It was a gamble, but one that paid off in status. The Earl hands you a small knife and an orange, already sweating in the sun. We cut them here, he says, but we never eat the whole thing. We leave half for the crows. Glance around. Sure enough, on the parapet wall, a neat row of peels and halves, gently drying. They take them, he says. I don't know why. Maybe they just like the scent. Fringe detail. Some old superstitions held that offering citrus to birds ensured good fortune or at least good weather. One 1782 diary from a Welsh estate records left a segment for the jackdaws. Rain broke. Ant recovered. Cause and effect, perhaps. Or perhaps just something kind that the wind appreciated. The sun warms your neck. The taste is sweeter than usual. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's the height. Maybe it's that you're not eating for comfort today, but for joy. I come here when I forget things, the Earl says softly. Why we do the rituals, why we peel. It helps somehow to rise above it all. It's just far enough to remember the shape of yourself. You nod, you understand. For a long time, you sit in silence, the peel curling in your hand, the sun drying the juice on your fingers like a second skin. Below, the house hums quietly. Guests shift through breakfast. Servants begin their work. The kitchen door clatters, but up here, it's just you, the Earl, the wind, and the gentle, patient trees. Historians still argue whether these private garden rituals were meditative practices or simple eccentricity, but records show that many aristocrats wrote their most intimate diary entries while seated beneath rooftop orange trees. There was something sacred about the solitude, something quiet enough to hold grief without squeezing it. The Earl stands and walks to a trellis draped with faded ribbons. Visitors leave wishes here, he says. Not prayers, those go elsewhere. Just ... wishes. Things too soft for the chapel. He hands you a strip of cloth and a piece of charcoal. Write yours, or don't. The ribbon still counts. You pause, then write. Maybe a name, maybe a single letter. You tie it gently. Let it flap in the wind. You don't look back. As you descend the ladder later, the air changes again, warmer now. The lights slanted. The halls feel less haunted, the paintings less judging. You pass a mirror and catch your own reflection, rumpled, citrus-stained, wind-kissed. You look like someone who has stood where the sky begins. That afternoon, the household gathers in the orangery again, but for maintenance, leaves are clipped. Trees are clipped, trees are fed, pots are inspected. Everyone pitches in, from the Earl to the newest maid. It's communal, joyful, sticky. Edwin the gardener tells you, this is the real healing, not the baths, not the rituals, just mucking about with things that grow. You spend an hour digging compost, your hands brown, your sleeves rolled. The trees seem happier for it. So do you. As the day fades, a small girl daughter of one of the cooks offers you an orange she picked herself. This one's quiet, she whispers. It doesn't like big rooms, you thank her, pocket it gently. That evening, you sit by your window, watching dusk roll in over the fields. The orange is still in your hand, warm from your coat. You peel it slowly, reverently. Eat one segment, save the rest. Then, as the stars begin to appear, you place the peel on the sill. For the crows, or the wind, or the forgotten gods of citrus and sky. It doesn't matter who takes it. It's only that you offered. You wake to laughter. Not the polite kind, the rehearsed chuckles of parlor rooms, or the restrained titters of well-bred company, but real. Belly-deep laughter, echoing down the halls like music from a forgotten summer. You sit up, heart light, feet already moving before your thoughts can catch up. Something is happening, the orangery is transformed. Gone are the solemn rituals and hushed ceremonies. Today, the space bursts with garlands strung between trees, oranges painted with silly faces, and long tables covered with platters of citrus-glazed pastries, spiced orange cakes, candied peel, marmalades, and a centerpiece of fruit stacked so high it defies gravity. Someone's made a crown from orange rinds and placed it on the head of the butler, who accepts it with weary grace. Beatrice waves you over, grinning. "Welcome," she says, "to the Feast of Zest." No explanation is offered. None is needed. Psst, joy, that's the reason. Once a season, the household sets aside solemnity, rolls up its lace sleeves, and leans fully into citrus chaos. Children are allowed in the orangery. Servants dine with nobility. Rules soften. Black dog stays in the garden. You're handed a goblet of orange blossom punch and a warm pastry dripping with marmalade. You take a bite and nearly weep. Tastes like childhood, like something safe and ridiculous. You sit beside a girl with ribbons in her hair who's writing a love poem to her favorite orange. You laugh out loud. Here's your historical core. Georgian life, despite its formality, made space for absurdity. Country houses hosted all sorts of seasonal rituals, often blurring class boundaries during feasts or festivals. While harvest celebrations and midsummer games were more widely documented, smaller household traditions like the Feast of Zest appeared in scattered journals and family ledgers. Some were serious, some were pure nonsense, but all served the same purpose: joy as resistance. Today's fringe detail: one 18th century journal from Wiltshire mentions a fruit day during which guests were instructed to wear orange-colored garments and speak only in compliments. Anyone caught sulking had to eat a raw lemon. One lady cried, the journal says, but declared her tears were tart with triumph. Back in the orangery, a violinist plays something playful. People dance between the trees, careful not to bump the branches. Even Edwin, the gruff gardener, is smiling and wearing a sash that reads Duke of Peel. You spend the afternoon in wild delight. There's an orange rolling contest. There's blindfolded citrus tasting. And then, most curious of all, a ritual where guests write wishes on dried peels and toss them into a silver bowl of flame. You're right. Let the next sadness be gentle. The peel curls in the heat, the scent pure and sudden, like the end of a storm. You step outside for air and find the Earl on a bench, sipping cordial and watching the sky. He pats the space beside him. "I used to think all this was nonsense," he says. "The peels, the rituals, the birds. But now I think nonsense is what saves us." He gestures toward the sky, where the first stars blink through twilight. The world is too sharp, too serious. Sometimes you need something silly, something sweet, something that smells like light. You nod. He continues. "We don't do this because we believe oranges cure anything. We do it because it helps us endure the things that nothing cures." You sit there together in the blue hour, the laughter drifting behind you like smoke. The orangery glows, the lamps flickering between the trees like fireflies. Someone is singing off-key. Someone else is snoring gently beneath a table. You think about how many layers of life: it's joy, grief, silliness, shame, and how something as simple as an orange are ridiculous. Round, juicy think can hold all of it, depending on how you hold it. Historians still argue whether rituals like these were real or exaggerated. But even if exaggerated, you think, someone still laughed, someone still believed. Someone still peeled a fruit and whispered something they didn't know how to say aloud. The night ends with a quiet toast. Everyone holds up a segment of orange, no goblets, no glasses, and the Earl says simply, "To the zest that keeps us soft." No one replies, just the sound of bites and smiles. Back in your room, you find a gift, a small box of dried peels tied with blue thread, a note inside. For the next hard day, or the next good one, you place it beside your pillow. Not as medicine, as memory. The morning after the Feast of Zest is hushed from hangover, but reverence. Like a field after a storm, you wander into the orangery. It's empty, except for the scent of burnt peel, scattered ribbons, and one forgotten slipper. You decide not to ask. Today is called the Gentle Day. No guests, no performances. Everyone drifts like Miss Quiet, half dreaming. You join them, till Liddy finds you. She clutches a slim notebook wrapped in orange-stamped paper. It's time you saw the other book, she says. She leads you through unfamiliar corridors to a room lined with cabinets. Inside, dozens of journals, each labeled with a name, year, and a small citrus stamp. Liddy selects one and hands it over. The elixir attempts. You open to the first page. This mixture brings clarity for 4 minutes and 32 seconds. Longer if taken after honeyed toast. The rest reads like alchemical poetry. Orange rind with rosemary and ash bark. Oil steeped in dawn rain. Slices dried over lavender smoke and tucked under pillows. Each entry records an effect. Mood lift, tears, intense dreams, even unshakable desire to kiss the chimney sweep. You blink. Who wrote this, everyone? Liddy says. Over the years. A shared journal of citrus remedies. Some worked, some didn't. Historically, she's right. During the Georgian era, homemade elixirs were the rage among the curious and the quietly desperate. Oranges, seen as exotic and fragrant, featured heavily. Apothecaries crafted blends by temperament, melancholic, choleric, sanguine, or phlegmatic. One noted tonic, the elixir of solar cheer, mixed orange rind brandy, and saffron to restore brightness to the inner gaze. Fringe fact? A lost manuscript from the Bodleian Library once claimed that eating the first orange of spring while barefoot in morning dew would align the heart with the sun. Poetic? Possibly, but undeniably hopeful. You flip through more entries. 3 drops orange oil on pillow. Nightmare volume decreased. Dreamed only of gentle goats. Boiled peel with mint. Wept, then slept 12 hours. Woke wanting to write a sonnet. Burnt rind on windowsill. Felt like I forgave someone. Some handwriting is fresh, others fading. This isn't a trend. It's a tradition. It's an act of belief. Not just in the fruit, but in the ritual. You sit down and write your own. Peeled quietly, didn't eat. Just held it, felt less alone. You don't sign it. Later, you find the Earl in the garden, feeding birds. You mention the elixir book. He nods. We don't keep it for medicine. We keep it so no one thinks they're the first to feel strange. We walk together past a hedge shaped like a teacup, a bench carved with sit and unravel, and a small slanted orange tree. That one's called Hope, he says. She kept growing after the frost in '89. We thought she was done, but look, touches a branch, still blooming. Maybe naming plants was aristocratic whimsy, or maybe it was something gentler, naming a thing so it could be cared for. That evening, you're invited to a gathering. 5 people, a fireplace, a bowl of sliced oranges dusted with sugar and cardamom. No agenda, no spectacle. Someone murmurs, "My mother used to read poetry with a peel behind her ear." Another adds, "The smell of oranges is what trust feels like." No one disagrees. You don't speak, you just eat your slice. It tastes like comfort. Later, passing your window, you spot a candle beside a half-dried orange and a note. Still good. Still here. You pause, hand on the frame. The night is quiet. You take a breath and whisper, "Me too." You wake before dawn to the sound of bells. Not loud or urgent, just a slow rhythmic tapping, like porcelain meeting a spoon. It echoes softly through the halls, pulling you gently from sleep. You dress and follow the sound to the orangery, now lit only by lanterns. No candles, no lamps, just a warm gold haze. Everyone is barefoot, no one speaks. The stone floor is cool underfoot, and it seems to hum low, steady, like the earth holding its breath. Today is still morning. Once a month, the house observes this vow of silence until first light, not as punishment, but as protection. The world is loud enough, the Earl once said. Sometimes we must quiet ourselves just to hear our own name again. Someone hands you an orange, still warm from the hearth. You sit under a tree and hold it. Not peeling, not eating, it's just holding. The scent rises as your fingers press into the skin. Historically, some Georgian households, especially those influenced by Quakers or monastic practices, embraced moments of silence. These weren't religious mandates, but emotional resets. In this house, silence is paired with citrus not because it's sacred, but because it's simple. It fills the space, anchors the moment. You notice Beatrice quietly braiding peels. Someone nearby sketches a face on parchment. Edwin waters the trees in silence. No eye contact, no conversation, just quiet presence. A letter from 1791 describes one such morning. The silence carried weight, but it did not crush. Pried my thoughts open like segments. I wept quietly, and no one offered comfort, but also no one looked away. You sit like that for over an hour. The sky shifts from iron to lavender, then one clear bell rings. The cue. Everyone begins peeling their orange at once. The sound is soft and textured, like paper tearing in a library. The scent bursts into the room, a silent chorus. You eat slowly, one segment at a time. The taste is simple, quiet, not showy, like someone whispering. I'm here. Anthropologists say that shared silence paired with sensory rituals. Touch. Scent, taste can forge deeper emotional bonds than conversation. You believe it? When the last segment is eaten, people begin to speak again, gently. Thank you, someone says. Lovely, another murmurs. You say nothing. You don't need to. Later in the library, you're shown the Book of Mournings, a leather-bound volume, where guests record one word after still mourning. No names. No explanations. Flip through. Pause. Hollow. Held. Return. Stitch. You add yours. Breath. The rest of the day drifts like a long exhale. No music. No bells. Even the servants tread softly. The Earl oils a doorknob with orange cloth. It reminds the door not to slam, he says. Beatrice keeps a citrus bomb in her sewing kit. For when I hate a seam, I've sewn 3 times. One maid dabs orange oil behind her knees before hard conversations. So I remember not to run. None of them are joking. These aren't quirks. They're quiet scaffolding rituals for staying upright in a life that rarely pauses. That evening, you return to the orangery for dusk tea. The fire crackles. The room is dim, voices low. The tea is orange blossom and sage. The biscuits are sweet, slightly dry. You sit beside the tree named Hope, tracing the edge of a leaf. It's not superstition. It's not therapy. Just a way to notice, to be with something warm and alive. You finish your tea and say nothing at all. You're reading in the study when the house erupts in scandal. Voices thunder in the corridor. A door slams. A chair tips. The butler passes by at a near run and heard of. You rise, curiosity crackling behind your ribs, and follow the trail of noise through the gallery and into the drawing room. And there they are. Lord Elwyn and Sir Harrington, both red in the face, circling each other like duelists of old. One is waving a crumpled orange in his gloved hand, the other brandishing a crushed lace handkerchief. The tension is theatrical, but very, very real. You insulted me, sir. Harrington hisses, gesturing to the squashed fruit. It was a metaphor, Lord Elwyn shoots back. You were meant to reflect upon the bruises of the soul? A woman gasps. A maid quietly removes the tea tray from the fray. And then Beatrice steps in, arms folded. Gentlemen, she says, voice calm and clipped. If you must duel, at least use something fresher. She plucks a bright orange from the bowl on the mantel and tosses it at their feet. Everyone holds their breath. The men look at each other, then at the orange. And slowly, like thunder rolling back into the hills, the argument deflates. Laughter bubbles through the room. Even Sir Harrington chuckles. It was overripe, he admits. Lord Elwyn grins, a bit like your opinions on marmalade. You watch as the duel that wasn't fades into memory. But the story is already being rewritten into legend. The duel of the bruised orange. Here's your historical grounding. Duels in Georgian England, while rare, were real. But many more were threatened than actually fought. And sometimes objects, gloves, fans, even fruit became symbolic weapons. An insult wrapped in metaphor could be just as inflammatory as a blade. There are records, albeit fringe ones, of aristocrats taking grave offense at food-based gestures. One lord reportedly challenged a rival after being served a shriveled apple, clearly intentional. Another claimed the slice of lemon offered at tea was a direct assault on my temperament, but oranges were delicate, powerful, and when bruised dough, they meant something. Fringe detail. In 1787, A minor noble in Bath claimed a political enemy had sent him a crate of half-rotten oranges. In return, he sent a letter laced with bergamot and a dual invitation written on orange-stained paper. The fight never occurred, but a poem about it, titled Ode to the Bitter Pith, became wildly popular among boarding school students. Back in the drawing room, the drama has evolved into theatrics. Servant has laid out 2 chairs facing each other. Lord Elwyn and Sir Harrington sit solemnly, each with a fresh orange in hand. They stare, then peel simultaneously, each trying to outdo the other in grace and composure. The peel is unbroken, Elwyn announces, holding up a perfect spiral. I name mine diplomacy, Harrington replies, bowing over his fruit. Applause, someone starts sketching. Beatrice leans in and whispers, "You're seeing one of our better days." The rest of the afternoon is deliciously silly. I guests begin inventing new citrus etiquette. How to decline a marriage proposal using only orange segments. How to express discontent through peel arrangement. How to settle property disputes with juice tosses. By evening, an impromptu play is staged. The Rot Within, a citrus tragedy in 3 acts. The climax involves a weeping heiress throwing oranges from a balcony while shouting, "You zested me," and left. Ow. You cry laughing. But underneath the absurdity, something lovely pulses. The knowledge that people here aren't afraid of emotion. Even their arguments are tender. Even their mockery is soft. Historians still argue whether the aristocracy's emotional flamboyance was sincere or performative. But sincerity and performance aren't always enemies. Sometimes, ritual is how we rehearse being honest. Sometimes, even a theatrical duel over fruit can reveal a deep longing to be understood. That night, you find a card slipped under your door. On it, a single orange stamp and a handwritten note. To bruise is not to break. Let softness return. No name, no explanation. You place it beside your journal. Before bed, you sit with a fresh orange and peel it in darkness. Slowly, deliberately. Not as a message, not as a duel. Just because the scent rises. You breathe it in and think. Even when bruised, it still gives sweetness. The next day feels quieter than usual. Not solemn, not sad, but the kind of quiet that comes after a very good story. The house seems to exhale, content, a little tired, and glowing softly in the morning sun. Breakfast is subdued. Conversations drift like silk scarves in the breeze. You eat poached pears, drizzled with orange syrup, and smile as a young page boy tries to balance a whole orange on his head. And then you notice it. No one's holding an orange, not in their hands, not in their pockets, not tucked behind ears, in ribboned pouches, or on silver trays. Even the orangery is uncharacteristically minimal. A few trees stand bare, few bowls are empty. One servant walks by, carrying not citrus, but a bowl of apples. You blink. Changes in the air. You find Beatrice in the garden. She's seated on a stone bench beneath a sycamore, absent-mindedly threading clover through her fingers. "They've moved on," she says, before you can ask. "The oranges," you reply. She nods. "The young ones. They've declared it," you laugh. Just like that, just like that. Here's your historical anchor. Georgian fashion was notoriously fickle. One season saw a powdered wig stacked high with miniature ships. The next, sleek natural curls. What was in vogue, one week musk, lapdogs Turkish slippers, was mocked the next. Citrus, like anything else, was vulnerable to the whims of fashion. As newer generations of aristocrats embraced Enlightenment rationalism, orange rituals began to fade. The fruit remained a delicacy, yes, but the symbolism, the emotional traditions, too sentimental, too soft. Some even mocked their elders' citrus habits in print. One anonymous satire from 1798 titled, "The Peel of the Past" describes a fictional earl so obsessed with oranges he refused to sign treaties without one in hand. The juice made him diplomatic, the narrator quips. Fringe detail? One particularly rebellious group of young nobles in London called themselves the Marmalade Reformers. Their motto, "Sweetness must have logic." They hosted salons where oranges were banned outright and citrus-based conversation was discouraged. Ironically, they became known for their bitterness and accidental poetic justice. Back at the estate, you find the earl sitting in the orangery with a book in his lap and no orange in sight. You hesitate, unsure whether to mention the change, but he speaks first. They'll come back to it, he says. Eventually. Smiles. Not sad. Just knowing. These things always come in waves. Believe, we mock, we forget. And then one day, someone finds a peel in a drawer and cries without knowing why. You sit beside him in silence. They don't need it now, he continues. They're young. Their sadness is fast. It hasn't rooted deep enough yet to require fruit and fire and scent. You nod. It makes sense. But when it does, he says, they'll remember. Or if they don't, someone will remind them. The rest of the day unfolds gently. A few oranges appear here and there, but they're background now. Accessories. No one peels in ritual. No one sniffs for solace. The air is thinner for it. You notice the older guests sticking to old habits, wrapping peels, sipping cordial, offering segments before partying. But they do so quietly now, less performative, more private, like sacred acts that no longer seek applause. You visit the elixir room again. The journals remain. The peels are still drying in the windows. But the room feels like a library no longer read, not dusty, just paused. Historians still argue whether the decline of orange ritual marked a cultural evolution or an emotional loss. One essay claims citrus was an indulgence of the idle. As utility became virtue, sentiment was discarded. Another counters, the orange was not frivolous. It was a placeholder for softness in a world that did not yet have language for pain. You find yourself wondering which is true? That evening, you walk the path around the estate. A breeze picks up, and the trees murmur secrets to one another. The scent of orange trees has faded. In its place, lilac, chamomile, cool moss. You stop at the parapet wall where the earl once left fruit for the crows. It's empty now. No peels, no halves. It's just stone and sky. You leave nothing behind, but you place your hand on the stone and whisper, "Thank you," then turn. The night is long, but not lonely. You read until you're tired, tuck a dry peel beneath your pillow, not out of need, but out of habitant. Drift to sleep wondering if one day, years from now, you will find a forgotten orange tucked into the pocket of a coat you've long stopped wearing. And if in that moment, the scent will return. And if the feeling will too, you wake with a purpose. The change is subtle, but it's there woven into your limbs, resting in the space just behind your sternum. A sense of nearing something. Not an end, exactly, but something quieter. Something like completion. Today's overcast again, the kind of sky that feels like pressed linen. You wander the halls, noting how the light touches each room differently now. As though the house itself is winding down, easing into the softness of late season. You make your way to the library, where Beatrice is thumbing through an old guest ledger. When she sees you, she smiles. "It's almost time," she says, tapping the page. "For what?" you ask. She turns the book toward you, the final peel. At first you think it's another ceremony, maybe a farewell toast. But then she explains there's a tradition here, older than even the Earl remembers. Before a guest leaves the house, they must peel one final orange. But not for themselves, for the house. You follow her down to the orangery, which is quieter than it's been in days. The air is cool, the trees still. A single orange rests on a velvet cushion in the center of the room beneath the tree called Hope. No one else is present. "You'll do it alone," Beatrice says gently. "We all did." And she leaves. You stand for a moment, staring at the fruit. It's smaller than most, a little rough around the edges. You reach down, pick it up, and begin to peel slowly, carefully. The spiral isn't perfect. It breaks once, then again. But you keep going. The scent rises, bright, familiar, a little melancholy. You finish and hold the peel in your palm. Then, instinctively, you walk to the small trough near the compost wall, where past peels have been buried, burned, or scattered. You place your peel on the surface. You don't bury it. You just let it rest. Here's your historical anchor. Many Georgian estates had informal parting rituals, planting a bulb, tying a ribbon to a garden gate, placing a flower on a window ledge. It was believed that guests should leave something of themselves behind. Not clothing, not valuables, but intention, a gesture, a symbol, something small and deeply personal. Fringe detail, a single mention in a housekeeper S log from 1803, refers to a visitor of melancholy aspect who left a strangely shaped fruit peel beneath the north tree. She adds, he never returned, but the tree bloomed differently the following year. You return to the bench and sit for a while. The house feels different now, not empty, just full in a new way. Like a cup that has been drunk from, rinsed, and placed upside down on the drying rack. Later, the Earl finds you in the hallway. He doesn't ask if you've done it. He just hands you a folded letter. This is what we're left with, he says. When the fruit is gone, words. You open the letter in your room. It reads, if you've peeled, then you've seen. If you've shared, then you've softened. And if you've tasted something beyond sweetness, then the orange has done its work. Travel safely, carry the scent. And remember, sadness may return, but so can peel. You place the letter inside your notebook and pack your bag. It's not heavy, a few clothes. Book, one orange, firm and unpeeled. You walk the halls one last time. Touch the frame of the elixir room. Glance into the orangery. Pause beneath the rooftop garden hatch, but don't climb. Outside, the carriage is ready. The wind carries a faint trace of citrus. Historians still argue what truly happened in houses. Like this, whether the rituals had meaning, or were just the whimsical habits of people with too much time. But you think, does it matter? Meaning isn't always historical. Sometimes it's personal. Sometimes it smells like oranges. The road away from the estate is quieter than you expected. The wheels creak. The trees blur past. No one speaks. The coachman hums, off-key, something that might once have been a lullaby. You cradle the orange in your lap, unpeeled, warm from your hand. You don't plan to eat it, not yet. Maybe not ever. It's not about hunger. You glance back once and see the chimneys fading into mist. The orangery glass catches the morning light, flashing gold for just a second, like a last wink from a friend before they vanish behind a closing door. The orange rests against your palm, grounding you. It's strange, you think, how a fruit became a compass, how sweetness became survival. You reach into your coat pocket and pull out a few keepsakes. Folded ribbon, page from the elixir book, that small card with the note. Still good, still here. You tuck them deeper into your bag. Souvenirs that won't rot. The scent clings to your fingers. It always will, you suspect. Here's your last historical anchor, even after the decline of citrus rituals. Certain families pass down orange-related habits through quiet private means. Candied peel wrapped in lace and stored in a sewing box. A half-written letter scented with oil. An old man who, without explanation, rubbed an orange on the windowsill every winter. Fringe detail? A diary entry from 1812 by a young girl named Thalia reads, Mother cried today. I gave her my orange and told her it was for remembering warm days. She said it smelled like her mother's apron. You look out the window as the countryside unfolds. No ceremony waits for you in the world beyond. No peels under pillows. No trees with names. Just the everyday ache of being human in a place that often forgets how to be gentle. But you carry gentleness with you now. You carry something peeled. When the carriage stops at the station, you don't rush to leave. You sit a while longer, orange in hand, thinking of Lady Beatrice, the elixir room, the rooftop garden, the girl with the orange poems, the Earl's quiet smile, the scent of burnt peel, the room full of strangers peeling in silence. You step down. The wind here smells of coal smoke and wet iron, but beneath it, just barely, you catch a whisper of citrus. You breathe it in and feel the corners of your heart unclench. The orange stays unpeeled. It will, at least for now. Wind down so now, as you lie there, perhaps with your own light turned low, or the fan humming softly beside you. Let yourself drift backward through the glass of that orangery, through the mossy garden paths, through every hand that ever passed a fruit to another as a wordless kindness. Breathe in, let your breath be slow. You are not in a rush now. Imagine the weight of a perfectly ripe orange resting in your palm. Imagine the warmth of the sun lingering on its skin. Let the scent rise, not sharp, not sugary, just gentle. It's just there, like the comfort of a familiar voice in a quiet room. Let each segment of memory soften you. The girl writing poems in citrus ink. The midnight gatherings. The ribbon wishes. There were no great miracles here. No cures, no magic. Just the kindness of something simple and good. Something peeled open, something shared, in a world that often feels too fast, too cold, too loud. There was this place, this fruit, a story, and now you carry it with you. So rest easy. Let the scent stay with you a little longer. Let your thoughts go where they please. There's no need to hold anything tightly tonight. You've done enough. Close your eyes. Feel the peel fall gently from your hand. Let yourself soften. Let the world be quiet now. Sleep well. You're still good. You're still here.